Special shirt, and if you stay around to the break and past the break, I'll tell you the mystery that this shirt embodies. People are welcome to make guesses.
You're actually Cthulhu.
No.
Meanwhile, it's going to occupy my mind.
Maryland-born Randee Dawn is now a Brooklyn-based author and entertainment journalist who scribbles about the glam world of entertainment by day and spends her nights crafting wild worlds of fiction. Her debut novel, the humorous pop culture fantasy Tune In Tomorrow, was published this August. Randee is a former editor at The Hollywood Reporter and Soap Opera Digest, and these days covers the wacky world of show business for Variety, the Los Angeles Times, Emmy Magazine, and Today.com. Her love of all things Law and Order led her to appear in one episode and later co-author Law and Order SVU Unofficial Companion. Her short fiction has appeared in numerous anthologies and online publications, and she co-edited Across the Universe, Tales of Alternative Beatles. Beatles. Once a month, she can be found hosting rooftop readings at Ample Hills Creamery in Brooklyn. You can find out more at randeedawn.com or tuneintomorrow.com. Please give a warm Charm City Spec welcome to Randee Dawn.
Hi everybody, I am so excited. As somebody who grew up in Maryland, and Maryland is still part of my heart, I'm so thrilled to be able to do an actual reading in Maryland. So this is very exciting for me. So Tune In Tomorrow, very quickly, is about a reality TV show run by mythical creatures, for mythical creatures, but starring humans. And so I'll get into a little bit more about that actually I won't be reading that section, I'll be reading a different section. So the idea with that was, we love movies about magical things where there's spells and there's witches and there's, dragons and all that kind of stuff. That's very mundane to them. So when they're making entertainment, they want the exotic mundanities of humanity, like embezzlement, check writing, tell me about how you paid your taxes. And that kind of stuff sort of fits with the soap operas and the reality shows and all of that. So that's kind of where I got some of this idea from. But so where we are right now is the human named Star Weatherby has been hired at this show, and there is some mystery about whatever happened to the person who preceded her. She just kind of isn't talked about. Star is the first hire at this show in 30 years. And she's been doing some digging around, and for various reasons feels that she needs to go into the cave of a dragon who happens to be the show's receptionist and security guard, Phil, and he guards the scripts. So she is making plans to do that. On the surface, Phil made sense as a security guard. He was a proper, enormous dragon, theoretically full of fire in the belly and leftover meat in the teeth. But so far as Star had seen, Phil was a receptionist. For one thing, his belly fire was mostly a small, flickering flame. My therapist says I got lack of confidence, he muttered to Star some weeks back in his tractor-trailer-sized voice. I got issues. One of which was that flame, which meant he'd be more likely to smoke things than scorch them, and the fact that he'd never consumed a human. Yet, he always made sure to add, third eyelid nictitating over one lightning bolt pupil. It was meant to be a threatening gesture, but mostly it made him seem like he was winking at Star. His issues left him with a smaller skill set and fewer job prospects than most dragons of his size, which meant he put extra effort into guarding the contents of his cave, a jaggy, rocky opening that burst from the wall behind the reception desk like an explosion and emitted damp breezes. Star hadn't expected pushback when she asked if she could go through the archived scripts he held back there. Much had happened in the Centaur Park nexus, but the action item that had stuck with her was Nico's advice to read Joseph's old scripts. She knew they were kept in the cave. But for weeks, Phil had refused her entry. It's a mess back there, he said. I don't get visitors. He hadn't budged when she promised to leave any gold or jewelry alone either, The mere mention of precious valuables had made the spikes on his back rise up, piercing his gray shirt. Sparks had shot from the corner of his mouth. Star went back to the drawing board, refusing to give up. The scripts were the one tidbit of useful intel she'd gleaned from that bonkers afternoon in the Nexus, and she held onto that thread with both hands as the weeks dragged by. There was no section in the guide about how to deal with dragons, and back home on her side of the veil, the internet was so chock full of dragon lore as to be virtually useless. She wasn't going to stab him with a lance, and Oleander, that's her sort of intern brownie, they all get brownies as interns, had no tea that would knock out a creature of that size. Besides, someone would notice an unconscious security dragon if they did that. One idea with potential came from a web-based cooking show about historical recipes, in which she learned that some dragons could be felled with huge servings of Yorkshire parkin. She made 8 trays of the sticky gingerbread cake and hauled them in. Then they disappeared down Phil's expansive gullet in less than a minute. He belched and left a smoky stain on the far wall, then went back to being intractable. Star was getting desperate. Cessation of hostilities with Fiona had been fresh when she first approached Phil, and they couldn't last forever. She was going to have to find a misdirection that had staying power. Maybe offering Phil something he found irresistible. All of this assumed Nico hadn't been having her on, providing Star with her own misdirection. Ugh, Nico. He wouldn't come within a few feet of her except on set, and his sole communications in Central Park had been to send loud, gaudy flowers daily to her dressing room. The card always read the same: "Forgive me." Nope, Star thought each time, handing them over to Oleander to share with the other brownies, who ate them with relish, then picked their teeth with the stems. Watching Nico wear his hair shirt was satisfying, and Star was doing just fine in the silence. She had a new project in Phil. "Mortals steal from me." Phil slurped sriracha from his mug. "If my possessions are under threat, I can't help myself. It's in the blood. And if I let you in, I'd feel you in there rooting around, and you'd end up mangled or maimed or smoked, and I'd end up fired, and my therapist would have to see me 4 times a week instead of 3. Star shivered. It was like talking to Hannibal Lecter about his favorite recipes. Phil ran his long tongue around the inside of the cup, lapping up the final drops of the hot sauce. Sigh. There's never enough. A small explosion lit Star up. And that was it. Sriracha was going to save the day. Over the past months, Star had observed a few interesting facts about the effect of sriracha on Phil the Dragon. For one thing, he could sip it by the gallon. For another, it sent him into a blissful, meditative state that reminded her of her brother Bill getting stoned on the couch in their basement in Maryland. She'd brought in bottles of the stuff from time to time as a gift, but now she was going to give him more than he could handle. The next day, she cleaned out the Costco warehouse of their supply of the condiment and began importing 5-gallon jugs of Senor Sriracha through the portal, stacking them in her dressing room. 3 days later, the room had filled with 14 containers, and Oleander had questions. "Glad you asked," said Star, "because I'm going to need your help." Oleander clapped her hands in delight until Star revealed how close she was going to have to come to the dragon. "All you have to do is make sure he keeps drinking," said Star. She had brought along a series of PVC pipes linked together in a looping, swirling shape to serve as a crazy straw that would slow the draw on Phil's slurping ability. Based on observing the dragon, Star guessed he'd go through 5 gallons every 2 minutes, which would give her nearly a half an hour to get in, search, and get out. "Oleander is not on board with this at all," said the brownie. "Must Ms. Star do this?" "Star must," she said, giving the brownie a hug. "But if you don't want to help, I'll ask." "No." Oleander stood firm. "Of course, Oleander is there to help, but Star must be quick and careful. Yes?" "Hell yes," Star nodded. "I'll be faster than I've ever been before." With that, they wheeled out the containers in a cart and unveiled them in front of the dragon. "For you," said Star, waving her hand over the containers like a presenter on a game show. Phil smoked appreciatively and dropped his magazine. "For me?" "For putting up with my endless questions," said Star. "I even got you a special straw." Delighted, Phil snatched up the PVC pipe construction in his recently painted talons, stared into it, and began to bounce with excitement. The entire lobby shook. Oleander peered from behind Star. "Oleander is here to help with the containers," said the brownie, voice weak but steady. "No eating brownies, yes?" Phil's eyes were wide. He could barely focus on anything other than the bounty of containers in the shopping carts. "No brownie eating. Got it," he said. "Sriracha me." Star had plotted this out as best she could. Secrecy was optimal. She didn't want to provoke questions or have someone in charge tell her she couldn't do this. Chris was directing that afternoon, which meant they were bound to start late. Jason was out at a network meeting all morning. She'd convinced the Harrys and makeup fae to do her early, getting her hair pinned back and held in place, and she slid into costume before bringing Phil the goodies. She patted the pockets of her bomber jacket and nodded. "Don't go," Oleander grabbed onto Sam's jacket. "Too much danger." "Not if you help." Star hugged the brownie and took a deep breath, imagining Sam, fearless, game for anything. Sam is her character on the show. She shot a quick glance at Phil, who was settling against the outer wall of the cave, eyes fluttering closed as he slid into sriracha bliss. Her heart was pounding. Time to do this thing. Thank you, everybody.
Woo. Any questions for Randee?
Yeah,
Let's do one and then.
Okay.
this is actually more of a question for a writer as opposed to a question from the book.
Okay.
What kind of obligation do you think a writer has for the audience, to keep the audience in mind when they're writing their stories? Should the writer be writing for an audience, or is the writer faithfully recording a story that they're seeing, or what do you think the obligation is there?
Well,
Or if there is even one?
yeah, I think obligation is maybe a hard word here. It makes it sound like we're, right people,
Right.
I think the thing is, this is often said, this is not original for me, but the first draft of any book is the author telling themselves the story. So you overwrite, you underwrite, you just spill it all out, and then you go back in later drafts and you cull it and you put it into shape. And one of the reasons you're putting it into shape is, of course, is for yourself. It's also to make sure the story makes sense. But probably, there's some percentage, I think, in anybody who actually wants to, bring this into other people to read it, that you think about the audience. So I'm not saying it's a 0%, but I'm also not saying it's a 100% that you think about the audience. To me, writing this book meant I had to make myself laugh, and if I could make myself laugh, there was a good chance I could make other people laugh. So it's about a communal experience that you feel you can share with an audience. And so that to me is better than obligation. Obligation makes it sound like you gotta do that thing whether you want to or not. So does that answer the question at all?
Kind of, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we have another question here?
So firstly of all, I'd like to say, I'm glad your book isn't one of these dystopian books. It's funny.
Thank you.
And this is your first novel, correct?
Correct, yeah.
So have you submitted it for the Compton Purple Award yet?
As a matter of fact, sorry, I can't answer this without locking you. As a matter of fact, I have. I've gotten good intel from my pal Sarah over here, Sarah Pinsker, the amazing author, and she suggested sooner rather than later. So yes, I have sent it in, and hopefully anybody who's reading for that award will be able to pick it up.
So, simple question.
Sure.
Why sriracha? And did you taste test various srirachas so that you knew the appropriate texture and heat level for your dragon?
That is some investigation that probably ought to have been done by me, but the fact is, I'm a total wimp. To me, sriracha was first of all, it's this liquid that everybody knows about, and to me, a dragon who deals with heat would appreciate forms of drinking heat or somehow imbibing or ingesting heat. So that was kind of where that came to mind. There's a pair of authors who I'm friends with who live in Brooklyn named C.S.E. Cooney and Carlos Hernandez. And they are big on the spices, and they're always posting stuff about interesting spices that they found around the world and different hot sauces and everything. So I think probably that was somewhere in my mind when I was writing it. I'm like, what is she going to give him to knock him out? Well, we want to make it kind. We're not trying to hurt Phil. So let's give him something more than what he can bear. I mean, if somebody gave me this like an unending vat of ice cream that I could just eat and eat, I'd probably go into a food coma also. So it's about finding the right material for the right dragon in this case.
I have a question. Having done so much work with television and movies and so on, does that inflect the way you write a novel? Do you ever think about, could this be reformatted into some other more visual medium?
Yes, Netflix, please call. My guess, as a matter of fact. The thing is that they talk about write what you know. Well, I've been doing entertainment journalism since I was in high school at Gaithersburg High School, way back in the day. And I've been around TV, I've been around film, I've been around musicians for many, many years. And I've met all sorts of personalities and seen how the sausage is made behind the scenes at movies and on music videos and on TV shows and soap operas and all of that. And I thought, this is the thing that I know. If we're going to write about what you know, let's pour that into there. So it was about distilling that information to give people hopefully a little sense of how it is behind the scenes. I mean, we're saying TV reality show, but this really started out as a soap opera. Tune In Tomorrow is classic soap opera stuff. But when I was talking to the publisher who ended up picking up the book, they said, any chance you would make it more of a reality TV show? Because people don't really watch soap operas anymore. And I'm like, all right, fine, I can do that. If you're going to buy the book, I will do this thing. But it became kind of this hybrid of soap opera and reality TV show because the non-competition shows, I mean, let's face it, the Kardashians, Selling Sunset, those are soap operas.
Yeah.
They're about as real as soap operas. And they're kind of these ongoing, continuing adventures of. So that was actually a pretty easy change to make. So it was about, when I was covering soap operas and going backstage and watching them make the individual shows and meeting the actors, I was so impressed with these people. I mean, when you make a 5-day-a-week soap opera, you're basically making 2 movies a week with very little rehearsal, if none. Basically, you block and then you shoot, and no retakes. And it's very churning, and they call it boot camp for actors, and that's totally true. Actors will get like 60 pages to do in a day, and not a lot of rehearsal, if any. So I have so much respect for people who actually make that their career that I wanted to put some of that love into this book too. I have slightly less respect for reality TV show stars. That's a story right there. Did you have a question, sir?
I do. If Netflix calls you, will you do the voice of Phil? That was great.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, the voice I just did there actually felt like it had Elvis in it somewhere. Maybe there's somebody, I don't think that I would be the right person necessarily because I am not a voiceover person. Actually, if I may, there she is. This woman over here, Sandy, her daughter did the voice for the audiobook of this. And you, Sandy, and I met for the first time. And Rebecca, who did the book, she's from Maryland originally, Rebecca LaChance. She's amazing. So she could actually probably, if you listen to the audiobook, see how she does Phil and see what you think. But yeah, I think somebody with a really good, deep, gravelly voice who maybe has a little Elvis in them would be the right person to do that. If you listen to Mojo Nixon,
So
Elvis,
that's not Michael J.
Elvis,
Fox.
no, not Michael J. Fox. If you listen to Mojo Nixon, Elvis is everywhere. There's a little bit of Elvis in all of us.
Except Michael J. Fox.
Except Michael J. Fox.
How involved have you been with the audiobook process and what's the experience been like?
Well, actually, okay, so this is my debut book. It turns out it's also Rebecca LaChance's first novel that she's ever done. She's an actress, and she's actually on the West End right now. Is that right? She's doing West End?
Has been, but this is right now.
Okay, so she has been doing West End plays. She's American, but she lives in Britain, and I'm eternally jealous. But so since we were both new to this, we were like, let's talk. Let's have a Zoom conversation. And she made a whole list of how do I pronounce this, and how do you want this person to sound. And what was really interesting in that process was I had never, on the one hand, I can visualize this entire book. I know exactly, if I was director, I could block the scenes, I could tell you what the set design looks like, but I never thought really too much about what these people sounded like. Phil, I describe his voice as tractor trailer, so okay, that makes sense. And there's a character, for example, who is described as like somebody from Downton Abbey. So you can kind of come up with a little bit here and there, but I don't hear the voices in my head. So when she was asking me this question, I'm like, what do you think? And so it was actually really this nice collaborative process, and I was kind of handing it to her as the expert. as somebody who could really do this, and because she could do American and British accents, she was really perfect for this. So there were one or two people who inspired caricatures in this book, and I said, let me show you a YouTube video of them talking. And if you could get that voice, that would be nice, but that was not a requirement, so yeah, great experience actually.
Let's all thank Randee Dawn.